The galaxy had long ago reduced war to a science. Armies marched with mechanical precision, their weapons honed by centuries of conflict, their victories ensured by overwhelming technology. In this universe of fleets and fortresses, Earth was dismissed as an afterthought. The young species had barely scratched the stars, their weapons crude compared to plasma and particle beams, their worlds tangled with hostile weather and inhospitable terrain. To the Galactic Empires, humanity was backward, and their wildernesses, jungles, deserts, swamps, were little more than planetary scars, irrelevant to modern warfare. That arrogance shaped the invasion. The Tarthian Dominion, eager to demonstrate its dominance to allies and rivals alike, selected Earth as a target not out of necessity, but of vanity. A swift, humiliating conquest would remind others of their superiority. Colonel Vale, commander of the landing detachment, laughed openly when briefings described the thick jungles of the equatorial regions. His officers joined him, amused at the notion that intelligent beings would choose to live near such choking vegetation. Primitive environments breed primitive minds, Vale declared, his voice carrying the certainty of one who had never been contradicted. We will land, establish our beachhead, and the rest will crumble. As the fleet descended, the jungle stirred. Insects hummed beneath the canopy, birds shrieked at the smoke trails above, and somewhere in the shadows, 6 humans lay hidden. They were not ordinary soldiers, nor were they meant to fight conventionally. They were hunters trained for environments others avoided, chosen precisely because Earth's wilderness was not an obstacle to them, but an ally. At the center of the team crouched Staff Sergeant Cole, his face striped with mud and shadow. Years of service had carved discipline into him, but it was the jungle that had truly shaped him. He breathed in its humid air as though it belonged to him alone. To outsiders, the wilderness was chaos, endless green, buzzing life, oppressive heat. To Cole, it was structure and rhythm. He could hear when a bird's call was genuine or when it was silence masking a disturbance. He knew how the ground shifted before rain, how the light dimmed just enough to betray movement. The jungle spoke a language, and Cole was fluent. Beside him, Corporal Reyes adjusted the sight of her rifle. Where Cole embodied patience, Reyes thrived on precision. Her movements were sharp, efficient, with no wasted energy. Raised in a city far from any forest, she had embraced the challenge of mastering terrain so alien to her childhood. Now she moved with the same quiet ease as Cole, her body blending into ferns and vines as though she had always belonged here. She caught Cole's glance, and the faint smirk on her lips betrayed her anticipation. Private Mason, crouched a few feet away, was not so steady. Younger than the rest, his hands trembled slightly as he checked his gear. He tried to mask it, but the fear lingered in his eyes. It wasn't cowardice. It was the rawness of a soldier facing his first true hunt. He had trained for this, but training never captured the weight of silence before battle, the moment when the enemy was real and closing fast. Cole noticed the tension and gave him a subtle nod, a wordless reassurance. Mason straightened his back, breathing deeply. The others, Hall, their demolitions expert, along with 2 scouts, Daniels and Ford, completed the circle. They were specialists, but more importantly, they were a unit, bound by trust forged in the hardest places Earth had to offer. Here, in the steaming heart of the Amazon, they were not out of place. They were home. Above them, the sky split with fire as the Dominion's transports roared downward. Trees bent and cracked under the force of their descent, clearing vast scars in the jungle. The noise was thunderous, unnatural, but soon it faded, replaced by the hissing of alien machines and the clipped barks of soldiers establishing their perimeter. Armored figures poured into the clearing, their exosuits gleaming, weapons humming with energy. To them, the act of setting up camp was routine. They had done it on countless worlds. They saw no reason why this would be different. From the ridge, the humans watched in silence. Reyes whispered into her comms, her voice barely a breath. They're spreading too wide. Overconfident, not watching their flanks. Cole studied the formation through binoculars. Their sensors swept the air, Their drones circled overhead, yet their movements betrayed carelessness. They marched as though the jungle itself would yield to them. He lowered the binoculars, his jaw tight. They don't respect the ground they're standing on. Hours passed as the aliens erected their structures, metallic shelters unfolding from compact blocks, sensor arrays stabbing into the soil, weapons emplacements humming to life. Their officers spoke with easy arrogance, mocking the mud clinging to their boots, cursing the insects that buzzed around their helmets. To them, the jungle was an annoyance, not a threat. Cole signaled to his team with 2 fingers. The humans shifted like shadows, repositioning along the perimeter. Reyes found a perch high in the trees, her rifle steady against her shoulder. Mason crawled through the mud, setting thin wires across a narrow path, his breathing shallow but controlled. Hall worked silently with a block of C4, concealing it beneath a mound of wet leaves. Each movement was precise, deliberate, and purposeful. They did not need numbers. They needed patience. As dusk fell, the jungle came alive with its nightly chorus. To the aliens, it was noise. To the humans, it was cover. When the first alien officer removed his helmet and stepped into the open, Reyes squeezed her trigger. The shot was soft, swallowed by the forest, but the officer fell instantly, armor cracking as he collapsed into the mud. Confusion erupted. Shouts echoed as soldiers scanned the tree-line, beams of light cutting through foliage but finding nothing. Cole's hand signaled again, and the team melted back into the jungle, unseen and unheard. A second alien patrol stumbled into Mason's wire, triggering a silent trap that snapped tight around their legs. Their screams carried through the darkness before a knife silenced them. Panic spread through the camp. Plasma fire hissed into the night, scorching trees, but the jungle swallowed the energy without flinching. Vale emerged from his command tent, his voice sharp and furious, demanding order. But order was gone. His soldiers clustered together, weapons shaking, eyes darting at every rustle. He barked that it was nothing, that primitives could not threaten the Dominion. Yet even he felt the unease. These attacks were not random. They were surgical, calculated. Cole and his team regrouped a mile away, the glow of the alien camp flickering faintly in the distance. They crouched in silence, listening to the chaos ripple outward. Mason's breathing was fast, his hands twitching, but his eyes burned with something new, resolve. Reyes checked her rifle with mechanical precision, her face unreadable. Hall grinned faintly as he packed away his gear. Cole studied each of them, his voice low but steady. They think we're hiding. They don't understand. We're hunting. The jungle around them buzzed with life, unconcerned with the war unfolding beneath its canopy. But in the darkness, a truth had been planted. The aliens had landed with arrogance, mocking the wilderness. Now, fear had taken root among them, and the hunt had only begun. Under the canopy of green, the jungle swallowed the light of dawn, leaving the alien soldiers uneasy as they broke camp. Colonel Vale had expected efficiency, but the night had been restless. Strange noises echoed through the darkness, calls that their translators could not classify, rustling that sensors insisted was nothing more than small fauna. Yet his soldiers had jumped at shadows, and worse, 3 patrols had failed to return. Vale told himself it was terrain confusion, perhaps faulty navigation equipment, but he could not ignore the bodies discovered at dawn. They had been arranged deliberately, displayed like warnings, half buried in mud, armor pried apart as though the jungle itself had consumed them. He knew it was not the jungle. Something unseen stalked them. The soldiers tightened their formations, but the forest offered no comfort. Their armor hissed as the humidity seeped inside, clogging filtration vents, rusting delicate joints. Vines dragged against their legs, thick roots tripped even the sure-footed, and each movement forward became a battle against an environment that refused to yield. They were used to battlefields that bent beneath their machines. Here, the world resisted them at every step. Among the humans, the silence was purposeful. Cole led his team with patient discipline. always signaling before moving, ensuring that every placement of boot or rifle avoided detection. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him, not just for his team, but for the defense of Earth. These 6 operators were not meant to defeat an army by brute force. Their role was sharper, subtler, to bleed, confuse, and terrify until the jungle itself felt alive with malice. Reyes kept her rifle ready, her gaze flicking between sight lines, always searching for the perfect angle. She had seen the aliens stumble through the undergrowth, their gleaming armor dulling beneath mud and sweat. To her, they looked like children in oversized suits, armored but blind. She thought of her father's words before she joined the military. People think survival is about strength. It's not. It's about knowing what the land gives you and what it takes away. She smiled grimly as she watched another alien squad hack apart vines with energy blades, wasting energy and time. They were prey now, though they had not realized it. Private Mason, the youngest of the squad, shifted uneasily as he checked the tripwires he had set the night before. His heart still raced from his first confirmed kill, a silent strike with his knife in the dark. He told himself he was ready, but the memory replayed in his mind. The alien's surprised gurgle, the sudden weight as the body fell. He had expected triumph. Instead, he felt a hollow ache. Cole had seen the look in his eyes afterward and had offered no lecture, only a steady hand on his shoulder. Mason understood the message. It was natural to feel shaken, but the mission demanded focus. By midday, the aliens had begun deploying drones, sleek, insect-like machines that buzzed overhead, scanning for heat signatures. For a moment, Vale felt relief. Technology would pierce the veil of this primitive wilderness. Yet when the results came back, his relief turned to rage. The sensors lit up with hundreds of signatures: mammals, birds, reptiles, even the heat of the earth itself. The forest blazed like a battlefield filled with invisible armies, overwhelming the drones until they were forced to withdraw. Vale slammed a fist against his console. Pathetic world. It bends itself to shield these creatures. His adjutant shifted nervously. Colonel, perhaps they have adapted. Vale cut him off with a glare. Adaptation is irrelevant. We crushed them. That is all. But his words rang hollow, even to himself. The humans chose that moment to strike. Cole whispered the order, and his team split into pairs, each taking a different flank. The jungle concealed them perfectly. Reyes found her perch in the crook of a giant tree, settling her rifle against her shoulder as Mason crouched beside her with binoculars. Across the clearing, 2 aliens were adjusting a sensor relay. Reyes exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger, and one dropped soundlessly. The other turned in shock, only to be dragged into the undergrowth by Cole's blade before a cry could escape. Panic rippled through the alien ranks once more. Their weapons fired into the foliage, bursts of plasma scorching leaves and branches, but hitting nothing of substance. Their discipline fractured, soldiers yelling in their guttural tongue, each convinced the enemy lurked just behind them. The jungle magnified their fear, turning every shadow into a threat. That night, their paranoia deepened. Lanterns lit the camp, their glow cutting small islands of safety into the ocean of darkness. Yet the soldiers could not rest. From the shadows came the sounds of movement, branches creaking, water splashing, distant screams that seemed human yet were not. Some swore they saw figures drifting between trees, faces masked in green, eyes glinting like predators. Vale barked at his officers to restore order, but even he felt the press of something closing in. The galaxy had trained him to face armies, fleets, and sieges, but never a silence that suffocated thought itself. Meanwhile, the humans sat in perfect stillness just beyond the glow of alien lights. Cole studied his team in the dim moonlight. Reyes was calm, her face expressionless, though Mason fidgeted, his nerves raw. Sergeant Hall, their demolitions expert, toyed silently with a block of C4, his eyes distant. Each of them carried scars, visible and invisible, but together they formed something the aliens could not comprehend. A unit forged in hardship, bound not by fear, but by trust. Cole whispered, barely audible, "Tomorrow, they'll make mistakes. We'll turn those mistakes into openings. Stay sharp." His words carried more weight than any order. They were a promise. By dawn, Vale ordered his troops deeper into the jungle, hoping to outmaneuver the unseen hunters. He did not realize that every step pulled them further into the labyrinth designed not by man, but by nature itself. The forest closed around them, narrowing paths, tangling roots, forcing them into predictable channels. Cole's team was waiting. The first explosion hit at midday, ripping through a column of soldiers as they crossed a riverbank. Mud and water swallowed bodies, dragging armored figures beneath before they could react. Survivors scrambled for cover, only to stumble into crossfire as humans opened fire from invisible perches. The aliens returned fire, burning swaths of forest to ash, but the humans had already vanished, leaving only smoke and corpses. Vale felt his composure crack. His soldiers, once proud, were reduced to frightened animals, stumbling and shouting in a jungle that turned their armor into coffins. He slammed his fist against a tree, roaring in frustration. "Show yourselves, cowards." But the jungle answered only with silence. That night, as rain hammered down and thunder rolled through the canopy, the aliens huddled together in misery. Cole's team watched from the shadows, unseen, unbroken. Mason whispered, "How long do we keep this up?" Cole's reply was quiet, steady, certain. "Until they understand this place isn't theirs. Until they learn fear the way we've lived it." The rain masked his final words, but each of his soldiers heard them clearly. "We're not hiding. We're hunting." The jungle reeked of smoke and ionized air. Trees blackened by plasma, fire leaned like broken spears. Their charred remains still smoldering as the alien troops advanced in tight formation. Colonel Vale had ordered the forest burned to flush out the humans, but the effort had backfired. The smoke clung to the ground in suffocating sheets, obscuring vision, and the heat only worsened the soldiers' exhaustion. Their suits hissed and vented in protest, meant for sterile battlefields and urban campaigns, not this endless mire of mud and choking air. From a ridge above, Cole crouched low, his rifle braced against a moss-covered root as he observed the aliens below. His face was streaked with soot, his breathing controlled and deliberate. Every movement of the invaders was a study in desperation. They fired wildly at shadows, wasted ammunition on phantom movements, and cut at vines as though the foliage itself was their enemy. He could feel their fear, taste it in the way they clung together, tighter and tighter, as if afraid the jungle would swallow them whole. Beside him, Reyes adjusted her scope. Her lips curled into the faintest grin. They're bunching. Perfect angles all around. Almost too easy. Cole gave no answer, only a slow nod. The mission was not to relish the kill, but to dismantle, step by step, the will of the invaders. He signaled silently, and the squad dispersed into practice positions. Private Mason crept down the slope with a wire spool in hand, laying the final section of a trap he had been assembling since dawn. Sweat dripped into his eyes, but he ignored it, his hands steady as he worked. His earlier unease had not vanished, but it had hardened into determination. Each movement mattered. Each trap meant another alien who would not threaten his world. He remembered Cole's words, "Stay sharp," and repeated them like a mantra. The aliens never saw it coming. When the first of their column crossed the tripwire, a mine buried beneath the muck erupted, swallowing 3 soldiers in mud, fire, and fragments of armor. Before panic had spread, Reyes fired from her perch, her shot clean and precise, striking an officer's exposed joint. The formation broke instantly, soldiers stumbling into one another, their commanders screaming futile orders. From the opposite side, Sergeant Hall unleashed a spray of suppressing fire, each bullet snapping branches and striking armor until the jungle itself seemed to spit death at them. Cole's voice cut through his team's comms, calm and measured. "Shift, reposition, vanish." As quickly as they had appeared, the humans dissolved back into the green, leaving the aliens firing into nothing, their voices rising in panicked roars. The jungle reclaimed its silence, broken only by the whimper of wounded soldiers and the hiss of failing armor systems. Vale stood in the chaos, his jaw tight. He had been trained to expect resistance, but not this kind of war. This was not battle as he understood it. This was being hunted. His forces had the numbers, the technology, the firepower, yet none of it mattered. The humans struck like phantoms, never visible long enough to be countered, always gone before retribution could be dealt. He called for drones again, demanding tighter scans, but the machines returned useless data, their sensors clogged with interference from the smoldering forest and the thick storm clouds overhead. He deployed flamethrowers to clear more ground, but the smoke blinded his own troops and revealed nothing of their enemy. Every tool he trusted betrayed him here, and for the first time in his career, he wondered if his enemy had no weaknesses at all. Elsewhere in the jungle, Cole and his team regrouped at a concealed hollow. The air was thick with the scent of damp soil and gunpowder. Reyes leaned against a tree, her hands steady as she cleaned her weapon. Mason crouched near a small pool, splashing water across his face before refilling his canteen. His body trembled, though not from fear. Adrenaline surged through him still, a reminder of how close death always lingered. "You're steadier," Cole observed, his voice low but approving. Mason glanced up, startled. "Sir, you're moving like you belong here," Cole continued. "That hesitation you carried, it's fading. Don't lose it all. Fear keeps you careful, but you're finding your rhythm." Mason nodded slowly, pride flickering beneath his exhaustion. He had felt it too, the way his body had responded instinctively, each movement sharper than the last. He was no longer the uncertain rookie stumbling in the dark. The jungle was teaching him, shaping him. Night fell again, bringing with it a heavy rain that drummed against the canopy. The aliens huddled in sodden clusters, their once proud lines reduced to ragged camps circled by desperate watchfires. Vale paced among them, his presence a thin thread keeping order. He ordered sentries posted every 10 meters, motion sensors deployed, and constant patrols rotating. But no amount of vigilance could steady the fear gnawing at his soldiers' nerves. The humans struck again under cover of the storm. Hall planted charges near the camp's perimeter, timing them with the thunder. Explosions ripped through the night, and in the confusion, Cole's team opened fire from multiple angles. Aliens scrambled in blind panic, firing on one another in the chaos. By the time order was restored, dozens more were dead, and the humans were already gone, leaving only the echoes of laughter carried by the storm. Reyes whispered into her calms as they retreated through the rain. "They're breaking, Cole. We could press harder, take them apart faster." Cole shook his head. "Not yet. Fear is the weapon. Every hour they last in this jungle, the more it eats them alive. We don't win by rushing. We win by letting them rot." Vale, soaked to the bone, sat in his command tent staring at a hollow map that meant nothing. The jungle defied neat lines and tactical predictions. Every time he thought he had secured ground, the humans made it lethal again. His officers avoided his gaze, and even his adjutant had grown quiet, speaking only when pressed. The colonel clenched his fists, unwilling to admit the truth clawing at him. This campaign was already slipping from his grasp. For Cole's team, the war had shifted from survival to dominance. They no longer fought cautiously. They hunted with intent, choosing their targets to unravel the enemy's structure. Leaders fell first, their deaths sowing confusion. Communications relays were destroyed, leaving units isolated. Supply caches disappeared into the mud, stolen or detonated before they could be used. Piece by piece, the aliens' war machine crumbled until all that remained was fear, hunger, and the weight of the jungle pressing down on them. By the third night, Vale's army was barely functional. Patrols refused to leave camp. Sentries fired at shadows until their weapons overheated, and soldiers whispered of ghosts haunting the trees. The colonel roared at them, but even his voice could not smother the dread that grew with every passing hour. And above it all, hidden in the branches, Cole watched with cold precision. He knew the breaking point was near. The invaders had thought Earth primitive, its wilderness irrelevant. Now they were trapped in a green hell they could not comprehend, stalked by hunters who knew every route, every river, every whisper of wind. The time for the final strike was approaching, and Cole could feel it in his bones. The jungle had already claimed victory. All that remained was to make the invaders understand why. Dawn broke sluggishly, the sky veiled in gray clouds that pressed heavy against the canopy. The jungle dripped from the night's storms, every leaf slick with moisture, every step sinking into mud. Colonel Vale stood at the edge of his dwindling encampment, his armor streaked with grime, his posture rigid despite exhaustion gnawing at his limbs. Around him, what remained of his once proud army clung together like frightened recruits, their numbers thinned and their spirit fractured. They were soldiers of a galactic empire, bred for precision and dominance. Yet here they resembled castaways, eyes hollow, weapons trembling in hands that no longer believed in their use. Vale forced himself to ignore the stench of decay. His gaze swept the tree-line, daring it to reveal the hunters he could not catch. The humans were not ghosts, he told himself, not spirits conjured by the forest's madness. They were flesh and blood, but no less lethal for it. Their invisibility came not from sorcery, but from mastery, a kind of warfare that scorned the doctrine of overwhelming force. He understood that much now. The question gnawed at him. How long until his soldiers broke entirely? Cole crouched a kilometer away, watching the camp through a thermal scope. His team had settled into silence, conserving strength for what came next. They had bled the invaders until their will was brittle, carved away their confidence until paranoia rotted them from within. Now the final strike loomed, the decisive blow that would shatter what remained of the alien foothold. Cole felt the weight of it pressing on his shoulders. Each move mattered. If they faltered now, the enemy might regain its footing, and all their patience would unravel. Reyes lay beside him, her cheek against her rifle, eyes steady through the scope. "They're not even pretending to stand tall anymore," she whispered. "Look at them. No formation, no discipline. Just meat waiting for the butcher." Her voice was sharp, but beneath it lay a fatigue she couldn't mask. Weeks of constant ambushes, of living as shadows, had stripped them down to instinct. Yet her determination burned undimmed, a fire refusing to die. Mason shifted uncomfortably behind them, his hands tightening on his carbine. He was harder now, the nervous rookie transformed by trial. But he still carried questions in his eyes, questions about killing, about what it meant to dismantle an army one frightened soldier at a time. He caught Cole's glance and straightened his posture. "We finish this," he said firmly, more to himself than to anyone else. Cole studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Yes, we finish this." As the sun clawed higher, the humans began their final movement. Hall planted charges along the riverbank where the aliens had parked their remaining shuttles. Each explosive was buried beneath mud and water, disguised so thoroughly that even a trained eye would miss it. The others spread out in a crescent around the camp, rifles and knives ready, every path of escape already mapped. The jungle itself seemed to lean closer, its dripping leaves and tangled roots eager to assist in the hunt. Inside the camp, Vale gathered his officers, though few remained. His voice was hoarse, stripped of its commanding luster. "We cannot remain here. Supplies are gone. Communications are severed. We march for the extraction point." He did not mention that even their extraction was in doubt. Their orbiting fleet had gone silent after the first days of chaos, unwilling to risk more lives against an unseen enemy. He ordered the march anyway, because standing still meant death. The column formed with reluctance. Soldiers stumbled forward, weapons slack at their sides, heads jerking at every rustle in the undergrowth. They did not notice the shapes drifting through the trees, watching, waiting. Cole's team tracked them like wolves following wounded prey, never close enough to be seen, never far enough to be escaped. The first explosion tore through the rear guard. Mud and fire swallowed half a squad, and in the confusion Reyes opened fire, her shots surgical, felling officers before they could rally their troops. Hall's charges ignited in sequence, crippling the alien shuttles in bursts of flame that lit the canopy like a storm. The aliens screamed, not in battle fury but in raw panic. Their retreat dissolved into chaos, each soldier sprinting blindly, colliding with one another as the jungle funneled them into kill zones. Cole moved with deliberate grace, firing only when certain, conserving every bullet. He saw the fear on their faces, saw the cracks widening until the army ceased to be an army at all. They were animals scattering from predators, each step deeper into the labyrinth that Cole and his people owned. He felt no joy in it, only grim necessity. The galaxy had mocked Earth's wilderness. Now it would be remembered as the crucible where arrogance perished. Vale stumbled through the carnage, his chest heaving, his command dissolving around him. He bellowed orders until his throat tore raw, but no one listened. Soldiers discarded rifles, ripped off helmets, fled without direction. Plasma bolts hissed into the dark, hitting nothing. And through it all came the whisper of human rifles, the silent snap of traps, the thunder of detonations timed with merciless precision. Finally, Cole's voice cut through the calms. Push them to the river. His team tightened the noose. Reyes harried them from one flank, Hall from the other, Mason driving them forward with relentless bursts of fire. Cole guided the flow like a shepherd, forcing the survivors into a narrow stretch where the river boiled with unseen current. The aliens, desperate for escape, plunged into the water without thought. The river claimed them. Those who survived the current met the final ambush. More charges detonating beneath the surface, hurling bodies skyward in fountains of mud and blood. By the time silence returned, the jungle was strewn with wreckage, broken armor, shattered weapons, and the remnants of a force that had once considered itself invincible. Vale crawled from the riverbank, his armor split and leaking, his eyes wide with disbelief. He looked up through the smoke and saw them at last. Figures in ghillie suits, faces painted in earth and ash, eyes cold and unwavering. For the first time, he saw his enemy not as primitives, but as something far more dangerous. Hunters, survivors, ghosts of a world that had never bowed to outsiders. Cole stepped forward, his rifle trained, but not firing. His voice was steady, almost quiet. Go back. Tell them what you saw. Tell them Earth isn't prey. Vale staggered to his feet, trembling. He wanted to speak, to deny, but words failed him. He turned and fled, stumbling into the wreckage of his ruined army. Cole did not pursue. The message had been delivered. When the jungle finally grew still, Cole lowered his weapon. His team emerged one by one, exhausted but alive. Reyes exhaled sharply, wiping sweat from her brow. Hall checked the remaining explosives, already planning the next move. Mason stood in silence, staring at the devastation with eyes that held both horror and pride. Cole looked at them, his voice carrying the weight of finality. It's done. They'll remember this place. They'll remember us. Above the canopy, the clouds parted just enough to reveal a sliver of pale sunlight. The jungle steamed in its warmth, concealing its dead, erasing the footprints of battle as though it had all been a dream. Yet in the stars above, the story would spread like wildfire. The galactic armies had mocked Earth's wilderness, and in doing so, they had learned fear.